It was the summer of 2018, and a group of 4 college friends decided to go camping in the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest. They were looking for a break from city life, a chance to unplug and enjoy nature. The spot they chose was deep, in the woods, miles from the nearest road, surrounded by tall pines that blocked out most of the sunlight, even during the day. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and pine needles, and the only sounds were the rustling of leaves and distant bird calls. They set up their tents in a small clearing, built a fire, and spent the first evening sharing stories and laughing around the flames. But as night fell, the forest seemed to close in around them, the darkness feeling heavier than usual. The friends, let's call them Alex, Jordan, Sam, and Taylor, had hiked in with backpacks full of supplies. Alex was the one who planned the trip. He was an outdoors enthusiast and assured everyone it would be safe. They roasted marshmallows and talked late into the night, but around midnight, they started hearing odd noises. At first, it was just twigs snapping in the distance, like something large moving through the underbrush. "Probably a deer," Alex said, trying to sound confident. But the sounds got closer, circling their campsite. Jordan shone a flashlight into the trees, but all they saw were shadows dancing in the beam. They tried to ignore it and went to bed, zipping up their tents. Sam and Taylor shared one tent, while Alex and Jordan took the other. Inside, the air was chilly, and the forest sounds amplified. Every creak and rustle felt like it was right outside. Sam whispered to Taylor, "Did you hear that?" "It sounded like footsteps." Taylor nodded, her heart pounding. They lay there, listening, as the noises grew more deliberate. Then, around 2 a.m., they heard a low growl. Not like any animal they'd recognize. It was deep, guttural, echoing through the trees. Panic set in. Alex called out from his tent, "Everyone okay?" They all responded, but the growling continued, getting nearer. Jordan suggested they build up the fire again to scare whatever it was away. They all emerged from their tents, flashlights in hand, and piled more wood on the embers. The fire crackled back to life, casting flickering light on the surrounding trees. For a moment, it seemed to work. The growling stopped. They sat around, the fire, wide-eyed, waiting. But then, from the edge of the clearing, they heard a voice. It was faint at first, mimicking Alex's earlier call. "Everyone okay?" The friends froze. It sounded just like Alex, but he was sitting right there with them, his mouth closed. "What the hell?" Jordan whispered. The voice repeated, closer now. "Everyone okay?" This time, it was accompanied by the sound of branches breaking, as if something was approaching. Taylor grabbed Sam's arm, her nails digging in. "That's not possible," she said. They shone their lights toward the sound, but saw nothing, just endless trees. Alex stood up, yelling, "Who's out there? This isn't funny!" The voice echoed back, now in Jordan's tone. "This isn't funny." The mimicry was perfect, down to the slight tremble in the voice. The group huddled closer to the fire, their breaths coming in short gasps. The air felt colder, like a chill wind had swept through, carrying the scent of something rotten, like decaying leaves mixed with blood. As the night wore on, the voices multiplied. It started calling their names. "Sam! Taylor! Where are you?" But it wasn't coming from any of them. Sam suggested they pack up and leave at first light, but dawn was hours away. They tried to stay awake, feeding the fire, but exhaustion crept in. Around 4 a.m., Taylor dozed off for just a moment. When she woke, Sam was gone. His sleeping bag was empty, and the tent flap was unzipped. "Sam!" she screamed, alerting the others. They searched the clearing, calling his name, but the forest swallowed their voices. Then, from deep in the woods, they heard Sam's voice. "Help me! I'm over here!" Alex and Jordan grabbed flashlights and ran toward it, with Taylor following. But as they pushed through the brush, thorns tearing at their clothes, the voice kept, moving farther away. "Help me!" it called again, now sounding pained. They ran for what felt like forever, the trees seeming to twist and close behind them, disorienting them. Finally, they stopped, out of breath, realizing they were lost. Chuck's voice had led them away from camp. Panic turned to terror as they heard rustling all around, multiple sets of footsteps circling them. In the dim light, they caught glimpses of shapes, tall, shadowy figures that didn't look quite human, with elongated limbs and eyes that reflected the flashlight beams like animals. One lunged forward, and Jordan screamed as something sharp grazed his arm, drawing blood. They bolted back the way they came, crashing through the undergrowth, hearts racing, the metallic taste of fear in their mouths. Miraculously, they stumbled back into the clearing just as the sky began to lighten. Their tents were shredded, supplies scattered. But Sam was there, sitting by the dying fire, looking dazed. "Where were you?" Taylor cried, rushing to him. Sam blinked, confused. I don't know. I woke up here. I thought I heard you calling." "Me." But his voice sounded off, slightly too flat. They packed up quickly and hiked out, not stopping until they reached their car. On the drive home, Sam didn't say much, just stared out the window. Weeks later, back in the city, things got weirder. Alex started hearing Sam's voice calling from empty rooms. Jordan's wound never healed right. It festered, like something was inside it. And Taylor? She swore that in photos from the trip, Sam's eyes looked different, reflective, like those shapes in the woods. They never went camping again, but sometimes at night, they still hear the voices, mimicking their own pleas for help. Whatever was, in those dark forests, it didn't just scare them, it followed them home. And to this day, they wonder if the real Sam ever came back. This next story comes from a woman named Emily, who shared her experience on an online forum back in 2020. She was an avid solo camper, someone who enjoyed the solitude of nature to clear her mind. In the fall of that year, she headed to a remote forest in the Appalachian Mountains, a place known for its thick fog and ancient trees that twisted like they were alive. The trail she took was overgrown, rarely used, and she planned to spend a weekend alone, reading by her tent and hiking. During the day, the air was crisp, filled with the scent of fallen leaves and moss, and the only company she expected was the occasional squirrel or bird. She arrived at her campsite in the late afternoon, a small spot beside a babbling stream, surrounded by towering oaks that blocked the sky. Emily set up her one-person tent, started a small fire, and settled in with a book as dusk fell. The forest grew quiet, unnaturally so. No crickets, no wind rustling the leaves. She shrugged it off, attributing it to the season, and crawled into her tent around 10 p.m., zipping it shut and turning on her lantern for comfort. The light cast long shadows on the nylon walls, making the trees outside look like they were reaching in. Around midnight, she woke to the sound of footsteps crunching on the leaves outside. Slow, deliberate steps, circling her tent. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She lay still, listening, telling herself it was probably a deer or a raccoon foraging. But the steps were too heavy, too rhythmic, like a person walking with purpose. She reached for her phone, but there was no signal this deep in the woods. The footsteps stopped right outside the tent flap, and she could hear breathing, shallow, raspy breaths that sent a chill down her spine. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice trembling. No answer, just more breathing. Then, something pressed against the tent wall, like a hand pushing in, deforming the fabric. Emily scrambled back, her back against the opposite side, watching. The imprint of fingers splay out. It lingered there for a moment before withdrawing. The footsteps started again, moving away into the trees. She didn't sleep after that. Every sound amplified. A branch snapping, leaves rustling. Even the stream seemed louder, like it was whispering. At dawn, she emerged, scanning the area. There were footprints around her tent, large, boot-like impressions that didn't match, her own hiking shoes. They led off into the fog-shrouded woods. Shaken but determined, Emily decided to stay another night, convincing herself it was just a curious hiker who got lost. The day passed uneventfully. She hiked a bit, explored the stream, but kept glancing over her shoulder, feeling watched. The forest felt oppressive, the trees looming like silent guardians hiding secrets. As evening came, she built a bigger fire, hoping the light would deter, whatever it was. But as night deepened, the footsteps returned, closer this time. Again, the circling, the breathing. Emily sat up in her tent, knife in hand, whispering, "Leave me alone." The response was a low chuckle from outside, muffled, but distinctly human. Terror gripped her. She shone her flashlight through the mesh window, and for a split second, she saw a face, pale, gaunt, with hollow eyes staring back. It vanished into the darkness before she could react. The footsteps quickened, now accompanied by scratching, sounds on the tent, like nails dragging across the fabric. Emily's mind raced. Was this a person? Some drifter living in the woods? Or something worse? She waited until the sounds faded, then unzipped the tent and bolted for the trail, leaving everything behind. But in the dark, she got turned around, the fog rolling in thick, disorienting her. Branches clawed at her face, roots tripped her, and she could hear the footsteps following, gaining ground. "Help!" she screamed, but the forest absorbed her cries. Then, a voice called back, not her own, but mimicking her. "Help!" It was close, too close. Emily ran blindly, her lungs burning, the cold air stinging her skin. She felt something grab her ankle. A hand? A root? And she fell hard, twisting her leg. Pain shot through her, but she crawled forward, dragging herself until she saw a faint light ahead. It was her own fire somehow. She'd looped back to camp. Gasping, she huddled by the flames, knife ready, until morning. At first light, she limped, out, following the trail markers she'd ignored in her panic. When she reached her car, she drove straight to the nearest town and reported it to the rangers. They searched the area but found no one. However, they did discover an old, abandoned cabin not far from her site, hidden in the trees. Inside were signs someone had been living there. Scraps of food, a sleeping bag, and walls scratched with tally marks, like someone counting days. But the chilling part? In the dirt outside her tent, they found more footprints, and embedded in one was a lock of hair that matched Emily's color exactly. Emily never camped alone again. She still hears footsteps in her dreams, and sometimes, when she's home alone, she swears she hears that chuckle echoing from the shadows. Whatever was, in those dark forests, it wasn't just watching, it was hunting, and it got a piece of her that night. Our final story is from a man named Mike, who recounted this on a podcast in 2019. He and his brother, Chris, went on a brotherly bonding trip camping in the Black Hills Forest, a vast wilderness in South Dakota known for its eerie rock formations and legends of strange happenings. It was early spring, with patches of snow still on the ground, and the air carried a sharp, piney scent mixed with the dampness of melting ice. They chose a spot off the beaten path, near a cliffside overlook, setting up their tent with a view of the endless trees below. The brothers were close, sharing jokes and beers by the fire as the sun set, painting the sky in deep oranges that faded to black. The first night was peaceful. They talked about old times, the fire crackling warmly, warding off the chill. But as they settled into the tent, Mike noticed how silent the forest was. No owls hooting, no wind. It felt like the woods were holding their breath. Around 1 a.m., Chris shook Mike awake. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. Mike listened, a faint humming like a distant chant, coming from the direction of the cliff. It was rhythmic, almost melodic, but too low to make out words. They dismissed it as wind through the rocks and tried to sleep. The next day, they hiked, exploring the area. They found an old cave entrance partially hidden by boulders with strange markings on the walls, symbols that looked like they were carved long ago. Chris, being adventurous, wanted to go in, but Mike felt uneasy, a knot in his stomach. "Let's not," he said. "It doesn't feel right." They turned back, but throughout the day, Mike couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. Glimpses of movement. In the corner of his eye, shadows flitting between trees. That night, the humming returned, louder, closer. It sounded like multiple voices now, murmuring in unison. The brothers sat up, flashlights on. "What is that?" Chris asked, his voice shaky. Mike peered out the tent. Nothing but darkness. But the humming grew, vibrating through the ground, making their skin tingle. Then it stopped abruptly, replaced by whispers, indistinct at first, but soon forming words. "Join us, down below." Terror washed over them. Chris suggested they leave, but a storm had rolled in, rain pounding the tent, thunder rumbling. They were stuck. The whispers continued, circling the tent like the voices from the first story. But these felt ancient, echoing with a hollow quality. Mike's heart raced, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. "Ignore it," he told Chris, but his brother was transfixed, staring at the tent wall. Around 3 a.m., Chris suddenly stood up. "I have to see," he muttered, unzipping the tent and stepping into the rain. Mike grabbed his arm. "Don't! It's not safe!" But Chris pulled away, walking toward the cliff, flashlight beam cutting through the downpour. Mike followed, calling after him, the mud sucking at his boots, rain soaking him to the bone. The whispers grew louder, urging, "Come! Join us!" At the cliff's edge, Chris stopped, peering down into the abyss. Mike caught up, shining his light. Below, in the ravine, were shapes, dozens of them, pale figures standing in a circle, humming that chant. Their faces were blurred by rain, but their eyes glowed faintly, locked on the brothers. One reached up, as if beckoning. Chris leaned forward, entranced. "They're calling me," he said, his voice not his own. Mike tackled him back, both tumbling into the mud. "Snap out of it!" he yelled. Chris blinked, confused, as if waking from a dream. They scrambled back to the tent, barricading themselves inside. The whispers persisted until dawn, fading with the light. In the morning, they packed up and hiked out, not looking back. But the twist came later. Weeks after, Chris started having nightmares, drawing those cave symbols in his sleep. One night, Mike found him sleepwalking toward the window, whispering, "Join us." Doctors said it was PTSD, but Mike knew better. He researched the area and found old tales of a cult that vanished. In those hills decades ago, rumored to have thrown themselves off the cliffs in a ritual. Locals say their spirits still call to the living, luring them down. Chris disappeared a year later, leaving a note. "I have to go back." Search parties found his car at the trailhead, but no trace of him. Mike still hears the humming some nights, and he wonders if his brother finally joined them in those dark forests below. Which story scared you the most? Comment below and subscribe for more true horror stories.